This is Elizabeth. It is July 18th, and this is an interview with Dee Dee Salmon. Well, let's start at the very beginning. What made you decide to go to law school?
My mother.
Your mother?
Yeah, my mother always said, I argued so much that I, was like a lawyer and thought I should be a lawyer, and manipulated me to the point that I was a lawyer. Yeah. Whenever I would get mad at her, I would say, it's all your fault, I'm a lawyer. That's why I'm having all these problems. I could have been a buyer in a department store and been happy. So.
What kind of things did she do to encourage you to go to law school?
She bribed me with a car. As simple as that. And came out to Arizona and bribed me with a car. And I could go to law school, going 3 years to college and 3 years to law school. And so I graduated law school. I graduated college my second year of law school.
How did that work? I noticed that on your CV. How does explain that a little bit more?
I did all of my major and minor
Mm-hmm.
in the first 3 years, and so I took my electives in law school. And then my advisor screwed up, as sometimes they do, and and I ended up having to take an extra course while I was in law school. I had to go back and take another course in college, so I had to take my full load in law school and then an extra course in college, and then graduated my second year of law school.
And wow, how did
And then of course I graduated law school in the real time in my third year. So it looks funny because I graduated college in '62 and law school in '63.
It makes you look super impressive.
It does. It does. I wasn't very impressive.
And was law school what you expected when you got here? When you got to law school?
Law school was so different then. It was one of these things, look to your right, look to your left. We were the biggest class that they had in law school up to that time. We had 120 people and we graduated 63, of which 3 were women. So there was, and then one of the women had gone to different times, didn't start with our class, and they were both older, the other 2. And one had already had a career, Judge Fisher, Lillian Fisher, and Doris Mendel were the other 2. And she went to school after she started raising a family.
So you were the only young girl.
I was the only one in that thing, and I wasn't even able to vote at that time, so it was a different experience. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, I was kind of like the little sister of 60 guys, so it was pretty neat.
Did you feel, was there any hazing, or did you feel like, did any of your professors, you hear horror stories?
No, I didn't have any problem. I had an agreement with one of my professors who happened to have a very colorful vocabulary. It was a 740 class. And the agreement was that since I used to get up late then, I don't anymore, that I would get to class about 8 o'clock and he would get all of his language out of the way by 8, and from 8 o'clock on, he would say, well, now Miss Salmon's here, and we will have to behave ourselves. So. Anyway, but no, the people were very fine. I mean, all of the professors were fine. I had one professor, when I took my dog into his office to discuss a grade, got a little upset. But other than that, I was just a little different, and they weren't used to someone like me.
Different in what way?
I just was, I was from the South, and I was kind of just not what they normally expect. I wasn't very studious. Everyone said that what I did was I would take very good notes, but all of a sudden one of my co-students would say, you would always know it was exam time because all of a sudden Dee Dee would be in the study group with all of the brains. And so I owe it to my fellow students that got me through law school, because they were the ones that I would study with them for the exam, and they were always very good to me.
And so, I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about law school before.
No, law school was just very different then. I mean, I think they study it's a lot harder than it, in some ways now, than it was then. It was, everything revolved around the exam. You got no practical experience. You didn't get any practical experience, is better language. And yeah, the girls, women in the law school class, did not have the opportunity to work as clerks, and as the men did, and so therefore, as a result, you had no practical knowledge when you got out of law school because they didn't have any skills courses or anything like that when I was in school. It was all the basic courses. So other than being in moot court, which I was, or trial court, that was the only experience that you had one class in it that you had any to do with actually being in court, and that didn't teach you the basics of how to file documents and how to actually run a law office or anything like that.
Before we move on to those topics, was it like an unwritten rule that women couldn't apply for the clerks? I mean, how
They
did
just
it
didn't
work?
get hired. It wasn't. They just didn't get hired at that time. Most women worked either for the government or for a relative's law firm. There were very few women that worked. In fact, I can't think of any women that worked for any of the major law firms. I know that when I graduated law school, I went with the government, with the State Compensation Fund Industrial Commission. And then when I went with the firm Johnson, Hayes and Dowdell, when I left them, which was about, I think, 74, I think it was 74 or 70. I'd have to check. Anyway, at that time, when I went with them and was made a partner, I think I was the first woman that was in a major law partner in a major law firm in Tucson at that time.
How about the legal fraternities? They didn't let women in those, right?
No, in the legal fraternity, I was the mascot because they did not let you in the legal fraternity. And then at the softball games, I was the umpire. When they had the softball games. So it was a very different time. I did get to pitch pennies with the guys, and we did do the beer bus. We did do that type of thing. But it was a very different type of environment.
And once you got out, where did you go? What was your...
I went to Phoenix because, again, there were not very many law firms to my knowledge, there were no law firms in Tucson that hired women. So I went up to Phoenix thinking it was a bigger city. And I got my job serendipitously because I was in a apartment with another student that was working for the Industrial Commission. And so he said he was leaving and that I might get his job. So I applied for his job. I said, why would I want to work for the Industrial Commission? It doesn't have something to do with factories. I didn't even know about workers' comp because we'd never studied workers' comp. And I did get his job. I had a very unusual introduction to the supervisor that was going to hire me. He said, my friend Charlie said, if everybody gets drunk, she'll stay sober enough to drive you home. That was how I got my job. Not something nothing to do with my grades, nothing to do with my ability, nothing to do with anything.
And what was it like for your first job?
It was very interesting. There was a couple of things that happened there. One was, as a woman, one time, for instance, one of the judges, there was a hearing at the prison, and the judge came down and told my boss, Mr. Park, that he did not feel I should go to the prison because being a woman that I might have a problem there, or it might cause a difficulty with the prisoners or something like that. And so he felt that I shouldn't go to the prison. So there was...
So did you go? You didn't go?
I did not go, not because he said that, because my boss gave me the choice of it, but I just decided that there was no reason to, at that time, make a problem for my boss and the judge, because this is the judge that sat on a lot of our cases. However, there was other times where I had run-ins with that judge because I had a lot of cases I remanded from that, so I was not able to forego the animosity from the judge towards me by doing that. So I probably should have gone to the prison anyway. I didn't want to drive to Safford anyway, so that was a double thing. And then at one time, I had to go. You got paid very little at that time, and you had to go to California or to Lake Havasu, and you have to go through California. And one of the commissioners, because we didn't get paid hardly anything, I think when I started out, it was about $500 a month or something. And so I asked for an advance because they pay you for travel. And the commissioner called me in and he said, "Young lady, you need to learn how to manage your money." So that's why I had to find a way and had to borrow the money to go to Lake Havasu.
So did you feel constantly like you were, because there were so few women, that you were always, it was always being the object as, I mean, like, at one point did that stop, or did it not stop in terms of like the rarity of you being a woman?
I actually enjoyed some of it too. I got to tell you, sometimes it's nice to be the only woman amongst everybody else, and I did enjoy that. It also caused problems, not just sometimes with the men. When I first went to work, because I was a lawyer, quote, and I would look at something and say, well, this is not how you can do this. And at that time, the Industrial Commission, which is now the State Compensation Fund, had many women that worked there, and they were all claims adjusters, and it was people that had worked there for years. Well, I come in saying, this is not how we're going to do it. This is what is right legally. I am, at that time, young. I am a lawyer. I do not have their experience. I learned the hard way that this is not the way that you win friends and influence people. It took me at least a year and a half to come back and get them back in the fold, so to speak. When I left, I was the darling of most of them. But when I came, I kind of stepped on a lot of toes. I was saying what was right, but you don't tell people that have been doing something for 20 years and have a lot more experience than you do that they're doing something wrong. Just tell them they're doing it wrong. You have to work it a different way. And I learned, it was a very good lesson, because I carried that with me the rest of my life, as to the fact that you can get more with finesse than you can get with being a bulldog. And so that's something that you learn. And I became very close friends with most of those women as later years went on. And it took some time, though, to kind of revise their opinion of me.
Do you think that's a mistake that young lawyers make a lot, that they come in sort of in that way? I mean, do you have advice for young lawyers going into new spaces?
Well, I think the advice is to respect the knowledge. They may not have the education, but to respect the knowledge of everyone that you meet. And sometimes not to show your knowledge, to keep, to let it drift out in little bits and pieces so that you don't seem arrogant or know-it-all. And I'm not sure that young lawyers now do it, but I think that some of them probably are not quite as tactful as they might be when they're dealing with people who are not lawyers. But it was a good lesson. It was a very good lesson. So, but you asked me what one of the things about work, or what else I would do differently. I found that there are some things that you had back then, and I don't know if it still is, in the relationships with the men that you're working with. At that time, I just, if I had to meet someone after work and have to do something, as far as work was go, or stay late or do that, I never thought about the consequences or thought about how other people would look at it. At that time, I later found out that some people thought, I was having affairs with, some of these people that I was actually just working with. And so you have to kind of think what other people are looking at. It doesn't mean you change everything that you do, but maybe you give a little explanations as far as people, so that they don't think those things. I probably would have been wiser in some instances to say, boy, we were working late last night, look at all the work that we got done, rather than just not even commenting on it and let them think what they want. So that was another area that was a little ticklish at that time, and I'm not sure, I don't think that's true anymore.
Did you ever feel bullied by either workers or people on the other side, or that they were trying to bully you as a woman as opposed to a lawyer?
No, I never felt that way, and I always, I felt that 9 times out of 10 I got more mileage at that time, being a woman, with both the court and with I was just a novelty it was kind of like, gee whiz, let's look at her, you know. So it was, I got more mileage out of that than, I did not feel, I felt that my coworkers, the guys that I work with were always very, very good, and very fair. I had one episode, and I loved my boss. He was absolutely wonderful. He was a very smart man, and we became fast friends, and you know, in later life with he and his wife, and you know, the kids and everything like that. But at one point, it was time for salaries, and so everybody got their raises, and my raise was not up to the other men that were working in the office, and I think I at that time had 60 wins in the Court of Appeals and 3 losses, and so I was really upset and furious, and so I called him and I said, I do not understand this, and I just really, and then I wrote a letter saying that I cannot believe that the reason I did not get the raise was because I'm a woman, but I can think of no other explanation. And the attitude at that time from the commission and from some others was, well, the men had to support families, I didn't have to support a family, so I shouldn't get it. I did not get the raise that time, but the next time I was raised above the men, and from then on I earned more than the men in the office. So my boss was not someone that was going to say he was wrong, but at the same time he rectified the wrong. So
I want to ask you a couple more questions along this line because it's very interesting. And Jerry, do you know when women started? There was, I don't know if either of you know when there was more of a flood of women at the law school.
Mid-70s.
Mid-70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
Early
would
women
have
said it.
guessed.
Okay.
Did you see a difference? I mean, you came before the whole huge feminist wave of stuff, and sort of how did that impact once there was a whole new wave? There were more women. Did you see any changes in the culture, or in how you were treated, or your relationship with the younger women, or?
I didn't see any difference in how I was treated. I think that the biggest problem that the biggest problem I think that exists now and did in the couple years or 5 years before this, or maybe even 10 years, is that because there were so many women in law school, that they think it's going to be the same outside, and it still is not the same and was not 10 years ago. And so even though the people in law school increased, the women in law school increased, the treatment outside still remains, there's a disparity between the treatment of women and men. I think it's better now than it was, but I still think that women need to have, be cognizant of the fact that there are still differences outside. You know, there is, and I think one, I can't think, a friend of mine said that women will be equal when the mediocre among the women get the equal treatment and pay of the mediocre among the men. And I think that's a truism.
I agree. Usually women have to be extraordinary
Right.
to, yeah.
So when we reach that point, then it'll be an equal treatment.
And do you think we're getting there?
Oh, I think we are. I think we are getting there, and I think it's a lot better than it was, and I think it's for the good, because you can go into court and you're not the only woman that is around. Now, sometimes it's not. You know, I look around and think, well, gee, it was pretty neat being the only woman. But I think it's good that there's a lot more opportunities for women, and especially a lot more opportunities in trial work and being partners in firms and having some impact in the state bar. All of those things are all pluses, and we owe it to the people that have come before us.
Absolutely. So in terms of the inequities that are still out there, I mean, if there are young women watching this, what should they be looking for, and how do they deal with that when they come across it?
Well, number one, I don't think they should be looking for inequities. I don't think they should be looking for problems. I sometimes think that women do themselves a disservice when they pick out just some things. You go for the, fight the wars, not the battles. That's what I think you need to look at, is what is a major problem that is happening. You're still a woman, and I think no matter whether you're a woman or a man, or you use whatever attributes you have to make your success. So, there's some men that are very boyish and they use that boyish charm for the juries and everything else. So I think the fact that you're a woman is not something you should be saying, well, geez, I want to be treated equal to a man and I'm not going to use my femininity or the fact that I'm a woman in anything that I do. See, I disagree with that. I think that you use it because that's part of your character and your personality. And that's what you are. And just like we certainly do not chastise a man who may have a real aggressive streak or maybe very charismatic or what, to use that charm. We don't say, geez, he shouldn't be doing that. So I think that that's one of the things that women have to look at as they are women, and to use whatever personality that they have to use it. Now that doesn't mean overuse it. That doesn't mean go bat your eyes at the judge or the witness, say, will you please say what I want you to, or something. Not that I'm above whining at times, but but I do think you have you have certain abilities and you can make the most of them. The fact that someone may call you Dee Dee instead of calling you Miss Salmon, to me does not bother me. That's not, I know some people say, oh, they're calling me Dee Dee and so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. One of my opponents says, he would joke, he says, we go to the Court of Appeals in Phoenix, we make the argument, and the judge will say, well, Dee Dee, don't you think this way? Well, Mr. Crane, don't you think this way? And with a name like Dee Dee, not too many people call you Miss Sam. So I just think that those are minor things that you shouldn't get upset about. Get upset about the big things, about the fact that you didn't get the raise or the fact that you did not get the promotion. Those are the things to get upset about.
And what do you do then? I mean, do you fight do you write letters like you did, or do you can you do something to prevent that from happening, or?
It's a fact situation. You can't, it's very hard to give an overall view. I think that you cannot let people walk all over you. I did it, the way I did it was, I wrote these things, I put down in my letter everything that I did, how many wins I had, all of these things. And then I came, then I came down to a conclusion. And I didn't say, you're discriminating against me. I just said, I can't believe that the reason you didn't give me this raise is because I'm a woman, but I can come to no other conclusion. I'd like to know why I didn't get the raise. So I just think it's all how you phrase things. My suggestion is when they go into a job or whatever they go into, that if they feel there is certain things they're being discriminated about, they're not getting the cases or whatever, you need to talk to whoever is your supervisor or whatever, and I think sit down and talk to them in an open way. I'm not trying to complain, I'm not trying to do this, but I just want to know what I can do better so that I get thus and so. So that you're really asking for advice. And that's what you're trying to do. Now, they'll get the point, unless they're denser than all get out, that you're upset about this. But if you go asking for advice about it, it turns the tables a little bit to where then you become they become your mentor, and they're helping you out, and all of a sudden you'll start getting the cases that you wanted. Now, it may not work with everybody, but that would be the way I would approach it.
And what about salary inequities? Is that still, there's the hierarchy as you move up. Is there also...
They just did an economic survey for the State Bar, and I'm not sure exactly what it's going to show about things like that. I don't know that there is that much inequity in the middle echelon. There may still be in the upper echelon with regard to partners and all, although I think that it's more that there are not enough women partners, not that they're not earning the same as the men. That would be my take on it.
All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what you had suggested we talk about when we first started, before we turned on the tape, which is sort of the practical stuff when you get out of school, and your experiences and your thoughts about sort of that area of when you get out.
Well, I think the economics of the law practice and how you have to practice. When I got out, I worked for the state, which there's not too much economics except your own. How you make the paycheck meet your net expenses. But when you get out, if you take either open your own law practice or go in with a firm, I went in with Johnson Hayes and Dowdell, and the first thing, one of the jobs that they gave me, besides being a lawyer, was to make sure we got our costs paid. Well, that didn't happen until about 6 or 8 months after I'd been there. And it was a shock to me when I looked at how much costs I had run up for cases, because I'd never learned, even in working for the state fund, because if we needed to get doctor's reports and if we needed to do that, we just asked for them. I didn't have to keep track of, somebody else kept track and turned in the bills, but I didn't keep track of the overall amounts. So it was a big shock to find out how much cost you can run out just in a law office, and that's just costs for your client. And so I think that's one thing I was never taught in law school. And when I had to go collect these costs and make sure all the other attorneys and realize how many costs and how much money outstanding and how much you can do in 6 months, I think I'd wound up like $8,000 or $10,000 in costs. Well, that's a lot for your clients, and that's a lot for the law firm to absorb. So things like that, those kind of economics, I think, are not taught in law school and need to be looked at, because too many attorneys find out too late they've run up all these costs, and all of a sudden their bottom line, they're in debt and they have problems because they didn't keep a handle on their costs, and they didn't realize that how quickly that $25 for report for copies of medical records and $130 for a deposition, and how that can all mount up. The other thing about law school that I think they need to teach is the basics, which you now learn, I think, in your clinics, is just like where the courthouse is, how that you have to file things with the court administrator as well as the clerk of the court. If you need to get dates and times for hearings, just basic things of that nature that, to my knowledge, are not taught in law school. And that if you're going to either run your own law practice, or even if you're working for a firm, because some things you don't want to ask because you don't want to sound stupid. So it would be very nice if there was some kind of course showing you how a law firm worked and what to expect, so that when you get out, you don't feel like you're so stupid that you can't, or that you do something like that would be inappropriate.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. That's really interesting. About if, let's say, there is, let's say the law school said, okay, we'll do a course on that. How would you teach the thing about running up costs? How would you?
Well, I would get somebody. We have law office management with the state bar. I would get that kind of a course taught in law school, law office management, and it would be a basic course starting with how you set up a law office, what you have to know, because whether or not you do your own law office, it's still good to know. And even if you go to work for the government, you never can tell when you're going to have your own law office. Or it's not a bad idea to know how the other half works anyway, and what they have to do for in order to make a living. So I think one of the things I would do is just basically have a course. It would involve not only trust accounts, which is a very serious business and needs to be understood. I had no knowledge about trust accounts until I, got out of law school and had to do it myself. What to do about costs, how to deal with filing, calendaring, which is a very important part. What is the best way to calendar, your dual calendaring system, all of those things. Letters that you need, your CYA letters that you need to write when clients come in, that you either want to be clients that you don't take, or clients that you do take. All of those things. It would take a semester to go through, and there's more that I can't think of off the top of my head. Basically, even how your taxes and what kind of accountant you need, and how to process your tax returns. your quarterly reports, all of those things that I hate about a law office but have to be done. And unless you're rich enough to have a law office manager to do it, you're going to have to be the one that's to oversee the secretary. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble because you don't know enough to tell your secretary how it should be handled, or you rely on the secretary to do everything, and sometimes they screw up. So all of those things are necessary. And you need to know about malpractice. You need to know about returning phone calls, how to keep track of phone calls, how to keep track of your messages, and what letters to write during the case to your client, how to keep your client informed, how to make sure that your client doesn't feel because you don't call them back every day that you are neglecting them.
And do you think that people just learn this usually by trial and error?
By trial and error, and unfortunately, that's why we have some of it's more error than trial, and that's why we have so many discipline cases, or cases where clients call in to the state bar to try to find out what's wrong with their attorney. I think I can't, and I may be wrong about this figure, but I think it's something like 3,000 calls just to our ACAP about complaining about lawyers.
What's ACAP?
This is the what we now have at the state bar, where instead of having a client call up and say, I don't like this lawyer, they're not returning my phone calls, they're not they haven't given me my check for my settlement, all of these things. Instead of immediately sending them a complaint form to file for discipline, we have a gentleman or lady, whoever happens to be, I think that right now it's a gentleman, who basically tries to alleviate the problem by getting a hold of the attorney or to having the client and attorney get together to try to do away with whatever the problem is before it rises to the level of a complaint for bar discipline.
So do you think if law schools had this kind of class, then it would go towards sort of the bad rap that lawyers get and all that kind of stuff? Would it sort of increase reputation of law if we had trained people in this way?
I think it would help. It's not going to do away with the bad rep of lawyers, because the problem with that is you can do everything right in your world, but one newspaper article in the paper about a bad lawyer gives us a bad rep. So no matter what we do here, something that can happen in Oklahoma or New York or whatever can cause us to have a bad rep. Although usually the client that is involved with you doesn't feel that way because they're impressed with how you have performed. And so I think that helps at least some of the people to understand that lawyers are human and that we're trying to do a good job and we're trying to do the best job that we can for the public. But in this, I think what the class would do, however, would help attorneys to keep out of discipline problems early, to help them understand, here's the pitfalls that you can do, here's what you need to do. I think it would help attorneys to be more profitable when they open their own office, and maybe to have less attorneys where they have to leave their own office and go back either with the government or to another office. I think it would help that. I would think they would make them better employees for other law firms, because they would understand how that works and already be halfway there instead of having to be trained. The biggest problem I think now is in the old days, law firms, you would have a mentor, and that mentor would take you through things, and they would help you to get knowledgeable before you ever had to do a lot of legal work. Now I think you're more or less thrown out on your own. I don't think they have that type of mentoring as much. Some law firms may still have that, but a lot of law firms don't, and they throw you into the, they throw you right away into work and doing work, and then you're there a while and you may be writing briefs. Then the next thing you do, you're doing something else, but you never got that kind of training that you needed to get you up here. But they think you've got it because you've been here 2 years, so certainly you must know all these things. But they don't have the mentoring that gives you that kind of background. So I think the law school could do a lot for that, as well as help you in your knowledge of how the world works and how the legal field works.
Do you think that that's changed because there's more emphasis on law as business and as profit, or because of just the increased costs and why is the mentoring program disappeared?
I think it's increased costs to the law firm and higher salaries. I mean, if you're going to pay a lawyer coming in $80,000 a year, are you going to sit there and have a $500,000 partner spend their time mentoring? I don't think so. I think and some law firms still do it, but my understanding, and I'm not in a big law firm. I'm just in my own, and I'm by myself. But my understanding is that is one of the things that is not happening as much anymore.
So, since there's this gap, it seems like since the culture has changed, then that should become the law school's responsibility to do the training that was. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I have always felt. I mean, you're getting in. I have always felt that law school. I mean, I personally feel that sometimes I feel that there should be 1 year of law school and 3 years of internship type of thing, because I've always felt it should be the law school's responsibility. The law school in the past, at least when I was in law school, did not do that. They taught you supposedly how to think like a lawyer and do research and all. Well, that's all well and good, but I just think that it also is their responsibility to have a person come out of law school that has some knowledge of the practical parts of law and the practical ways of operating a business, and the skills, the ability to have the skills of the courtroom and of the skills of practice. I mean, who else's obligation would it be?
Well, I think maybe it was used to be the law firm's responsibility.
Why would it be the law firm's responsibility? I mean, what if a person's not with a law firm? You can't expect that out of, how many students do you graduate here?
150.
You can't expect that 150 students are going to be always with a law firm.
Right.
So I don't think it's their responsibility. I think it's the law schools.
I just lost my question. I had a question that went with that. Oh, yeah. So there's all these, all this talk now about sort of if we should change and reform the law school space, and do 2 years, 1 year of internship, add a fourth year of internship, or get rid of the bar test and do a summer of internship. Do you have any thoughts about that stuff?
Well, I was for 6 years on the committee on examinations, where we gave and graded the law school exam. I mean, gave and graded the bar school, the bar exam. And having read some of those papers, I am not an advocate of lawyers not having to take the bar exam. Some of these of the exams were dismal, to say the least, and you wonder how some of them graduated high school, let alone law school. Now, that doesn't mean, and I'm not picking on any law school, they could have helped out-of-state students with that, but I just say that, so some of the writing skills, their knowledge, and I know it's a terrible pressure at that time, so I would be reluctant to do away with the law school exam unless there was some very stringent type of internship, to where with someone who could grade that person so that they know their ability to be a lawyer. Now, that doesn't mean I made good grades, or I made good grades on the bar exam, because I didn't. I was never interested in grades. I had fun in law school, and that's a good excuse so that I can't say I'm dumb. But and I was just very lucky that when I went with the State Compensation Fund, I had an excellent mentor in Bob Park, who really was there when I needed him, and I could learn by example, because he was extremely ethical, extremely smart, and had a very pragmatic approach to things. And as he said, in the business, we need to, we were representatives quoted like an insurance company, that we need to give out every cent they're entitled to, but not 1 cent more. So I didn't get this bulldog or this kind of idea that win at all costs. I learned, I was very lucky to learn that way, but not everybody is. Not everybody gets that kind of training. And unless you had, not that the bar exam does train you, but at least you know whether someone has the knowledge, the ability to write, the ability to at least pass a test in order to become a lawyer. And then with the professionalism aspect that we then also give, you hope that you're turning out someone that is a good attorney. But I still feel that if you had a very stringent type of internship, similar to what medical school does, to where people really learn how to be a lawyer, that would work. And it, depending upon how that was, then I would say maybe to give, let the bar exam go. But it's a tough exam. It's an endurance test, and I hated it. I didn't even like being the grader, because every time I went in to be the grader, we were the monitors in the halls. You know, in the exam, I always got these butterflies in my stomach, just as when I was taking the exam. So, but at least for the time being, it's the best we have to try to measure whether or not a person will be a good lawyer.
So that's the purpose of it, as sort of a gatekeeper to make sure that. Do you see that the function of the bar is to make sure that there's a certain standard met, or?
Correct. A certain standard of knowledge. Now, it doesn't measure a person's personality, and it doesn't measure whether they're going to be ethical, even though there's an ethical test.
Mm-hmm. What about the notion in law? We'll do a little bit more on law school just because this is fun. These are going in an interesting direction. What about the notion that general knowledge versus specialized knowledge, and that there's this idea that the first year should just be general, and then the second year could be specialized, and that's the way it should go, or that you should always be sort of preparing for the bar the entire time you're here, or doing clinics. There's just...
I think it's unfortunate that there are the exams, certain parts of the bar, you know, so that people take those and don't get to take some specialization. But I also feel that you need a general knowledge, and that many people have no idea what they're going to be into, like I did. I didn't take one course in workers' comp, but I learned it by being there, and it has become a career. So what I think you have to do is you have to have the general knowledge to be able to have, just in case you run up against a certain area of the law that is within those bailiwicks. For instance, I was extremely surprised about criminal law, that it was only a semester when I was in school. I couldn't believe that's all there was to criminal law, is one semester. As it turns out, when I got out, because, and I went into practice after working at the State Fund, I did do a lot of criminal law, and so came in handy what I had from that time, because at that time you're trying to earn money, so I had court appointments and things like that. In fact, at one time I was the appointed attorney for a prostitute to represent her, and she called my office and she said to my secretary, "I am so glad that I have a woman as an attorney." And my secretary said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, because she's a woman and she knows the problems we working women have." so anyway, so the criminal law came into, I am glad that I took it. It's like a broad-based education in humanities. You may be an accountant, you may be a doctor, whatever, but the idea of having a broad-based education in humanities gives you more of a global view of the world and of what you're doing. And I think that's what a broad education in all of the areas helps. So I would be an advocate of the first year being a broad-based education. As far as The second and third year, again, there are some areas that it would be nice to study and to have specialization. If we ever got to the point where we had internships or clinics ability to where you could then actually have exposure to actual practice, then I think that the subjects on the bar exam do not become as important. It becomes more important to learn the clinic. To me, practical experience is in a lot of ways better than the educational experience, because you can always go to the books and look things up. You need to know how to look them up. You need to know how to prepare those briefs and how to do those things, but you don't need to know whether that ARS 23-1045 is a death benefit statute for workers' comp. You don't need to know that. You just need to know that there is a death benefit statute and how to find it. So, I don't know if that answers your question. It's kind of a convoluted way.
Okay, I'm going to switch topics so we don't run out of time. What about the relationship with your secretary? Like, as a lawyer, what is that relationship, and is it different? I mean, obviously it's probably different, but depending on the two people involved. But what sort of, do you have any thoughts about that for people who've never had a secretary or had someone helping them?
Well, for most of my secretaries that I've ever had have become very good friends of mine. I do think that it's easier to become a friend after they're their secretary than to have a good friend become your secretary, because sometimes you feel, you hate to impose on them in certain ways. It so happens I've had it both ways. And throughout most of my career, I have had 3 secretaries that I have had in my office, and I do now. Sometimes I've had 4. And most of them have become extremely friendly with me. I think that I have been lucky enough to have secretaries that have understood that when push comes to shove and I'm in a hurry and I need that I am the boss and I have got to get this, and this done. At the same time, I also feel that that you don't need to have the drawn line between the secretary and the boss. To me, you are a law firm, and that law firm is all these working parts that have to work together to make a success and to be a benefit to the client and to the public and to yourselves. And so it's like a cog in the wheel. One of those cogs, breaks, then the whole wheel comes down. And the fact that one cog may have a lot more knowledge than the others about certain things doesn't mean that I'm any better than they are. I had one secretary who lives in San Francisco now, and she was telling me that she was always Miss So-and-so, and when she was in the elevator with partners and their wives, they would not even introduce her. They just didn't say anything to her. That's how they were treated. There was this level, and then there was this level, and that is how that worked. That's not how it's ever been in my office. It's kind of this level, all in one. And that's what I think it needs to be. Men may have a little more difficulty with that. I don't know. I know that it's never been a problem for me to do it that way. And I think it's probably my office would fall down if one of my secretaries wasn't able to be there just as much as if I was unable to be there. Because we all work together and we all have our jobs. And I think that's important. I'm not sure, that may be where again, in my course that I feel should be stressed, because I think sometimes, not always, that some young lawyers come out and feel they've got all this knowledge and you're a secretary, and they don't really understand how to treat the secretary. And in fact, sometimes that secretary may have a lot more knowledge than you do.
So in that situation, let's say you're in one of those hierarchy places that it isn't, and you're a young lawyer and you don't know anything, and you have a very knowledgeable secretary that you're now assigned to. How do you proceed? It seems scary, and what do you do?
I think what you have to do is make friends with your secretary, because this is who's going to save your bacon, And I think you make friends with your secretary, and let them understand that, you're just, again, the use asking for advice, asking for their help and leading them through the maze of the firm, and what to do and what not to do, and who you can be casual with and who you can't be casual with, and all of those things. I think that you'd be foolish not to take advantage of the knowledge of the secretary. And again, I think the lawyers, I'm not sure how much lawyers understand the workings of the court, but sometimes the clerk and the court administrator or the judge's secretary are the ones that you need rather than the judge, because they're the gatekeepers and you need to get past the gatekeepers. My father is the one, he told me this a long time ago. He said, I'd much rather be friends with the shipping clerk than with the president of the company, because he used to buy closeouts and seconds and all like that, and it was the shipping clerk that knew where they were. The president of the company didn't. And so he taught me early in life that that's what you need to do, that you need to recognize who are really sometimes have the power or the knowledge or are in charge. Some people may be in charge in name only. But if you get crosswise with the secretary of a judge or the clerk of the court or the person who is the court administrator, then it's not going to make your life any easier.
So, okay.
And plus the fact you learn so much from them, and they're nice people, and it's fun to know them, and you find out what's going on in the courthouse, and you get the gossip, and and I just enjoy them. I really do.
Okay, so you figure out that you want to be nice, and you want to get to know them. How do you do that? How do you get to that space?
Well, I think everybody, with a young lawyer, they're going to give them some slack, so they're willing to have this, to be kind and to be nice. I mean, there's a few grouches out there, but I don't think it's that many. I mean, I'm very impressed with how personnel are. There's a few where, because of their power, they, they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But I would say 90% of them are really nice people, and they just want to be treated like human beings. They don't want to be treated just as, oh, I need to talk to the judge, so and so, and instead of saying, hi, how are you doing? Is there any, what's happening, and spending a little time to pass the time of day, as well as I want to talk to the judge.
All right, so let's do just a little bit more on this, because we've been getting very specific advice on things like this, because particularly for students who feel a little less socially secure, you go up to you're in a situation, you don't know the person. What do you do? I mean,
well, the first thing you do is you go up and you introduce yourself, and I would say, I'm Dee Dee Samet. I'm new. Talk about wet behind the ears. I've got a bucket behind my ears. What any help you can give me. I have these papers. Where do I go? Do I file them here? Do I need to go to the clerk's office? What do I have to do? And I have done that. I will tell you, I have done that, because at times I will have to go into a new situation and I don't know what I'm doing. And then I think you just, and you say, she may say, her name may be on the desk, and it may be Mrs. Jones or whatever, and you address her as Mrs. Jones, unless if she, or may I call you Kathy, or whatever it happens to be. And I think you just let them know and be upfront with your naivety and your lack of knowledge, and the fact that this may be your first time trying to see the judge, or trying to file a case, or trying to do a pretrial, or whatever it happens to be. Now, they're not going to give you legal advice, but it lets them know who you are, and that you're doing this. And then trying to remember the next time that you come, thanking them, or even calling them to, thank you for the advice. Gosh, that was really good. I went down to the clerk's office, and they told me what to do, and it was really nice of you to tell me, and I got it right so that I didn't make a fool of myself in front of my firm. And so I think you do that, because it's all true. You're not really putting anything on, because every bit of it is what is the circumstance.
Okay, so let's follow this out just a little more. So then you come back the next time. What do you do when you see them the next time? When you don't have actually questions, but you still want to have a connection with them?
Well, sometimes what I would do is if I'd had a funny experience with something else happening, I may say, gosh, you helped me with this, but boy, you should have seen what I did the last time on this particular instance. Or I really would, I'm so excited. I had this case in front of Judge so-and-so and I won. Whatever it happens to be, to make them as a part of that. They don't have a lot of time to talk, so you have to kind of make it somewhat short, but to make it more personal, so that you're not just a body of a person going there. Because the next time that you call and I need to get a calendar point thing with the judge. I need to really get this hearing there. Is there any time? Well, the judge doesn't have anything for 2 weeks. Well, my client's coming in from California. Is there any way to get it? That's it. That legal assistant is going to look at the calendar and maybe try to work you in. Whereas if you have just been, here's the papers, give this to the judge kind of person, you might not be able to, you're just a person. And obviously the judge's time is busy, and this is the gatekeeper. This is the person that controls a lot of the time that can be given to one thing or another.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the same with the clerk of the court and the court administrator's office. They're very helpful. They can be very helpful. But you just need, they're people, and that's the big thing. And the problem is, and I'm guilty of it as anyone, is that you're so busy and they're busy and you don't have time. And I can be very, at times, brusque, and I try to remind myself not to be, in the sense that because I'm trying to get through things. And then I have a terrible thing. I'm not good at remembering names. So that's not good. You should be good at remembering names. And it's getting worse. Do you think that's a sign of age? I hope not.
Just maybe too many names.
Yeah, too many names. That's right. Too many names to remember. Well, that's one problem, is that my name is so easy to remember. So people remember Dee Dee. And so it's really sometimes embarrassing. People come up to me and plus the fact when you see someone out of context, it's hard to bring them in. And that's...
So what do you do?
I just say, oh, geez, yes, it's good to see you too. And then they start talking and then eventually I get, oh, this is who it is. I never admit I do. Once in a while I do. Once in a while I'll say, I know this is stupid, but, what do they call it? That old-timers disease. I said, I just can't. Oh, yes, and then you know who it is. Sometimes you have to admit it. You're caught. Fine. I did that just recently. I was at the courthouse yesterday, or Monday, and I was sitting as a judge pro tem settling cases, and I went up to this person. I knew him. He was, hi, Dee Dee, hello. And I'm thinking, and I thought it was somebody different, and I said, well, what are you doing now? How's your work? And all, and he said, well, I'm working for myself, and, I left, and then all of a sudden I realized it was not the person I thought it was. Luckily, though, I hadn't made a mistake in calling him by name, and things like that. But, anyway, I just think, well, whoever you're dealing with, the fact that that if you do not make the bridges now, then if you have to go back over them and they're burned, you're in trouble. So I think you have to kind of start out your first day out with everybody you meet feeling like this is maybe someone that in the future I may come in contact with, so that they're going to think, as I tell my secretaries, trying to tell them that they always do it, and talking to clients, they should think you're better than hot bread with butter. That's the way you have to be, and they should think you're great. Now, unfortunately, they don't always do that, but.
Okay, so I have two more questions on that. So let's say somebody doesn't like you, or let's say somebody is really, really mean to you. How do you deal with it if you have that philosophy?
That's tough, and I've had that happen, where people haven't liked me. To me, it's a challenge. And then, so when someone doesn't like me, and I won't name names, but there have been times, and it's a challenge, and so I set about making sure that they end up liking me. And it's hard to do sometimes, and it takes a while. Sometimes it takes months with that, but I usually try to include them in things, various activities. other things, get them involved in committees, get them involved in other things that are and that I found out are important to them. And eventually, before I know it, I'm not, they don't feel that way about me, and they become, and as a matter of fact, some people have become my best friend after that. For whatever reasons, they didn't like me. And that happened to me in college. My roommate in college, we hated each other. We had the year before, we had this big altercation about it, and it's too long to go into, but whatever it was, my whole floor was involved with her whole floor. And we were kind of the instigators. And she was from New York. I thought she was like, and she would laugh at this, 6 feet tall with chains, but she didn't really have them. She had a Brooklyn accent, and she was from the Bronx. She was from the Bronx. And then we found out we were roommates because my roommate had left and had left college. And so it was just there. And now we're close friends. We talk. She lives in California. I mean, we talk on the phone almost every, 3 or 4 days. We just became close friends. So it can be done. You have to just make up your mind you're going to do it.
Yeah.
It's not nice to feel that people don't like you because it just makes you feel bad.
Okay, so do you have any other ideas on how to, if you because your idea of the committee work was really interesting. Do you have other ideas?
If someone doesn't like you, well, I think if a judge doesn't like you, then that's a problem. And I've had that happen. And that I never did get over. I mean, this one judge, like I was describing, he didn't like me. At one time, he came down to my boss's office and threw some papers on. I had been in a hearing with him. And one reason he didn't like me is he was fairly biased. I felt he was very biased. And my job was to represent the defense. But sometimes he was so biased, or there was truth to be found, and I would end up asking questions that would be favorable to the claimant, to the employee, and he would get just really angry with me. And so he grabbed some papers up from me and tore down to my boss's office with me trotting along behind. And he goes into my boss's office and throws it down on the table and says, "Look at what she does in hearings. Look at this." Well, I doodle. I have done this all my life in hearings. I draw pictures, and I have done that while I'm listening. I take notes too, but I also, when there's notes that are going on that I draw pictures, and there were these pictures of Woody the Woodpecker and all these things that were there. And luckily, my boss, as I say, he didn't want to offend the judge. He said, "Well," he said, all I know is that she wins most of her cases, so I'm not going to, until she stops doing that, I'm going to let her take notes the way she is. That Woody Woodpecker may mean something to her. It may mean that the claimant said this and so I'm not going to question. So anyway, so that was, but that judge never did. He liked me better, but I had so many appeals and so many times where I would take his decisions apart, because that was my job, to take a decision and then tell the commission whether I thought what I felt was wrong with it, or whether I felt it could be held up in the Court of Appeals. And so that's what I had to do, and then you just have to live with that. I think toward the end he had a little softening toward me, because but there's some people that just don't like you, and you're just never going to change their mind. So you have to deal with it.
How are we doing on time? Oh, we're getting past time. All right, well, we haven't done too much on sort of the details of your experiences, but we've asked this question of a lot of people, so I'll ask you. We've asked people what their happiest moment was in practicing law, if they have one or two happy moments that sort of, they just think, and it's been all over the place.
Well, I have a lot of happy moments. I have a lot of moments. I think law practice is really getting very stressful, and it's very difficult now, and not a lot of happy moments. I am happy overall in things like, for instance, yesterday I had a settlement conference where I was the judge in the settlement conference, which we just got a lot of issues settled, and I did an arbitration, and I had a deposition, and I felt like at the end of that day that felt a lot of accomplishment and felt good about it. Whenever I do settlement conferences and I end up settling the case, I feel good about it. One of the happier cases I had was I had a gentleman who was dying of cancer, of mesothelioma, and it was a really tough case, and we were able to win the case The judge had finally ruled in my favor, and in that particular case, the defense was that he had lived too long to really have a mesothelioma, because you only live like two years at most, and he had lived like 4 years, and he lived and died just right after the decision came down. And he had a wife and 3 kids, of whom the wife still calls me occasionally, and I still talk to her, and that was really, I really felt happy that we had won that case, and so that he could die knowing his family would be taken care of. So that was, those are good moments. Obviously, winning cases, when you win in the Court of Appeals, you get a good decision, or you get a compliment from a judge, where a judge tells you that you've done an excellent job of presentation or argument or brief or whatever. Those are always good moments too. I think the bad moments are having to deal with the general practice of law, clients that you work your butt off, so to speak, for them, get a wonderful result, and then they turn on you and feel that you don't need a fee, you shouldn't have a fee, complain about how you did what you did, and attack you personally and say, well, you didn't do anything for me, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. That makes you want to quit law, because you've worked very hard, and you end up with what you feel for the client, and then the client turns on you like a thief in the night. and it's very emotional. It really is, because you put a lot of your emotions into that case, and you practically lived with the client, and all of a sudden, listen to everything that's happened in their life and helped them in 5 other different areas, because not only the law, but they'll come to you about if they're bankruptcy, or if their husband is treating them badly, or their wife is treating them badly, or the creditors are after them, or will you please take care of this for me and call this creditor, or call this, or their son or daughter gets in trouble. I mean, all of these things seems to come to you, and then all of a sudden, and you may get a good result for them for their case and all, and then they just tell you, I'm sorry, you didn't earn your fee, or they complain to the bar about your fee, which I have had done before, and it's that's really very discouraging.
Is there anything you can do to prevent that from happening, or does it just part of the job?
Sometimes it just comes with it. It just comes with the job. It just comes with what happens. The other area that I don't care for about law is the Mickey Mouse, where other attorneys may make you jump through hoops to, when you don't need to, or the judge may make you jump through hoops, when you don't need to, just because that's the way it's, they want it to be done, or that's what the law is, or that's not what the law is, but the procedure. And I guess an example would be that sometimes you want to just say to the attorney, okay, I may be late in doing this particular thing. However, here's the reasons or whatever, and they say, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to file this motion even though I know the judge isn't going to grant it. So they file the motion, then you have to answer the motion, and then you have to go through all that. To me, it's unnecessary. Although most of my opponents are really good people, and I have a motto: if you can't use your opponent, who can you use? Because what happens is, one of my opponents I stay with when I go up to Phoenix. If I can catch a ride with them anywhere, so I have a hearing that I don't have to drive myself, I go with them. I had one occasion where one of the attorneys, I had this products liability case in Flagstaff, and so I called the other attorney and I said, can you drive me to Flagstaff? And he was just kind of shocked, because I guess they didn't do that much in Phoenix. And he said, okay. And I said, well, why should we both drive up for the deposition together? So he said, fine. He said, where should I pick you up? I said, well, I'm going to be staying at another opponent's house, so will you pick me up there and take me to Flagstaff? And on the trip up, he's saying, do you do this all the time? And I say, well, I mean, you can be good friends and with your opponent and still fight like everything. In fact, one of the U.S. attorneys once told one of the judges, and he said, I've known Dee Dee for years, and she's my most vehement opponent. I've over 200 cases against her, and she's one of my best friends. And so to me, that's the way you should practice law. And when people don't do that, and when people don't act collegially or take it personally or, really try to make things life difficult for you, just to make life difficult, even though they're not going to be successful, and that's not the merits of the case. That's what really bums me out about law, and kind of makes you think that, geez, is there any other way I can make a living?
Well, that's a really nice note to end on, I think. That was really fabulous.
Okay.
Thank you. I wish we had more time. You have so much. Is that,
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right, we're starting again. And we're going to be talking. Why don't you just go ahead and you were going to say stuff about.
Well, I wanted to stress the importance for students to become involved in the bar, to become involved with young lawyers, and then to become and then through that group also become involved in committees on the bar, committees of the bar. Number one, you never know what you want to be when you grow up. So you don't know whether you want to be a judge, whether you want to run for office, whether you want to become involved in as a member of the Board of Governors, whatever else you want to be, or even just in your own practice. And becoming involved with young lawyers and on committees helps you to build a network of people. And it's very important, not only what you do for these committees, but important for the relationships that you build. And the more people that you know, the better your career is going to be, whatever you decide to do. And on these committees are worker bees. These are the people that are going to do something with the state in the future. They are going to do something, because otherwise they wouldn't be involved in the first place. So they believe in doing these things, and as a result, they're going to be the president of the bar, or they're going to be in the legislature, or they're going to be a judge, or they're going to be the U.S. attorney, or they're going to be the county attorney or attorney general or whatever else. These are the people you're going to meet. And so I think that it's very important to build these relationships, because whatever you do, whether it be criminal law or civil law or whatever else, having these contacts are going to be helpful to you. That's one of the advantages. The other advantage is that you really help people, that you help whether it be help the law, to make the laws. If you're on the Civil Procedure Committee, it helps to make what are going to be the rules of procedure. If you're involved with the young lawyers and you're doing literacy, you're doing youth, drugs, and alcohol, and you're going out in the schools speaking on to the various classes about what's going to happen to them if they get involved with drugs or alcohol, and answering questions. It's fun, first of all, because you really learn how the youth thinks. Whatever it happens to be, you are helping the public, you're helping your bar association, and you're helping yourself. And I don't, that's a win-win-win. And so I think that you've got to really become involved right away. I know it's difficult because you've just passed the bar and you're looking around, but these people are going to help you with finding jobs. They are going to help you with learning what to do in your law office and how to not be as stupid as you may be because you don't know the ins and outs. A lot of the people, for instance, and young lawyers, and that's the first start you do in getting involved in the bar, are people that have been in there 3, 5, 6 years, and they have a lot of knowledge that they can help you with. And certainly you feel more comfortable talking with them than maybe the senior partner in your law firm about what you should do and how you should do it. And so I really urge people to not wait and think, well, I can do this after I get my job and after I get established. And there's a lot of hours, and there's only so many hours in the day, but most of those organizations, certainly the bar and certainly the young lawyers, realize you don't have all the time in the world. So they will say, well, if you can't do this, at least come to a meeting once a month. Well, that's 2 hours. Anyone can spare that time. Or at least come to becoming youth, drugs, and alcohol, where you go out to a school once a year for 2 hours. So you can become involved without spending a lot of time, but you still make these contacts. And so I really feel it's very important to do that. As a young one, you don't know whether you want to be a judge. You don't know what you want to do. But you should know one thing, that you want to be a part of the Arizona community and you want to be a part of the legal profession, and that it is important to make sure that that you do whatever is necessary to make yourself a known personality, because there's no downside to that, as long as you're not a mean, terrible, odd person, and your personality is not just the worst.
What about people who are going out of Arizona to bigger communities, like to California or New York or somewhere like that? Do you say do the same thing?
Absolutely, because whatever there is, the bigger community, there's still a smaller community within that community. So, like here, also, if you're in Tucson, you get involved with the Pima County Bar. Also, in Maricopa, the Maricopa Bar. All of these have the big community, but there's always a smaller pond there, and that way you become you become someone that is known, so that you're not, because that person that you're dealing with and that you're involved with that committee with may be the person that you see on the bench the next time you're in front, and they're going to know you. And it doesn't hurt to be known, that you're in. They know. So, for instance, if you come to them and say, I really was involved and couldn't get this motion in, I'm asking for a continuance, can I have it 2 weeks? They know from working with you on that committee that you are a hard worker, and that if you're saying that you have been involved, it's because you had things that you had to do, and they know that you're truthful, and that you have a work ethic, and that you're not just trying to con them, because they've worked with you. So it's I think it's a really plus, and I can see no downside to it. And what people don't realize is it doesn't take as much time as you think. Now you can be like a bar junkie like I and spend a lot of time doing. But I got into it by accident. I didn't just come out thinking about community work. Because again, it was not something I learned in law school. No one did tapes like this for me. And I just happened to get into it through a committee, which was, they were doing the Gender Bias Task Force. And I happened to be interested in something they were involved with, and got involved with them, and then all of a sudden went to other committees, and before I knew it, I was very involved. And then the other thing that happened was I did a lot of the continuing legal education for the workers' comp, for the state bar section. And so I got involved just doing that, and then got involved in the section, and eventually became one of the co-chairs.
And if you get on a committee, do you have any advice about being a good committee member? Is there strategy, or is there manners, or?
Well, do not go on a committee just to add it to your resume, because that becomes pretty obvious. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't feel that it's good for your resume. But if you're just on it to add it to your resume and you're not planning to work, then that is more of a detriment than a positive for you, because people on the committee will know that you're just there, because it doesn't take long to know this person's never does anything. So they obviously just want to put it on their CV. I would say this: when you get on the committee, you learn to know who is the co-chairs, and who have been the co-chairs or been on for a long time. Again, you don't want to be just the new kid on the block and try to take over. But at the same time, if you have good suggestions, you don't be afraid to make them. But you can't change everything they've been doing overnight. And you may see that they're doing something really stupid, and they're really doing hidebound. So you just, again, have to do it with finesse. You have to start moving the committee your way, subtly and slowly.
How do you do that?
Well, I don't want to give all my secrets away. Well, I think you come up with ideas, the good ideas that are, and you let them know, I think this is what should be done. And then they may say, well, no, we don't do it this way. Well, but then you do it. And if you bring the idea enough times, in different ways, and try to backtrack to where, well, let's see, I want them to change their the seminar that they're going to give so that it's not as boring. Gosh, this is boring. Well, what you do is you may say, well, why don't you let a half hour be thus and so? Let's not have the whole seminar this way, with that. What about letting it a half hour just to see if it works? And then pretty soon, what about if we do it this way for, maybe have 2 hours of this topic and all. And then so that you have to do, you can't just go in there and say, well, your seminar is really boring and people are going to go to sleep with it. So you just kind of urge them a little bit at a time toward that goal. Sometimes you can come up with it. Sometimes you can be very frank. It depends on the co-chair. You can come up and say, look, this is going to be in the afternoon. It's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's the last thing on the program, and we're going to have people falling asleep. So what we need is a really dynamic person to keep people there. Otherwise, they're going to leave, and if we have this other person here, it's going to be so embarrassing to have 4 people in the audience. So maybe we have to switch these 2 around so that the last person is this one, because you'll have more people in the audience, and don't you want to keep them there so that they're interested? Yeah, it sounds reasonable to me.
Do you think that there's this particular role that the younger members of the committees play as opposed to the more established members?
Well, I think that they can, that the younger member may and sometimes have more work that they would do of what they call the grunt work. I think that sometimes that can happen. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because if you show that you can do it and organize it and do it well, then you can move up in the committee. But you'd be surprised. There is such a need for people to do things, and the biggest problem is all of us in these committees say we need new blood. So they'll probably welcome you with open arms and say, what would you like to do? Because they're wooing you. You don't have to woo them, because they're so glad that there are other people, because they want them to be a part. Almost every committee I know wants to bring in new blood, wants to see this happen, because they feel like they're doing the same thing over and over again. And the same people are doing the same thing. So really, they're going to woo you, and it's not like what you can do. They're going to try to make you do whatever is going to be fun for you, because they want you to stay. They don't want you to leave. So I think it's going to be a surprise for you as to how and what they'll do. They'll just say, what would you like to do? And so it's not always going to be always the grunt work.
What about where you work? Are they happy that you're involved with this, or do they think that it's going to take away from your work time?
My secretaries really feel sometimes that I try to do too much. They always say, why do you have to have every hour in the day covered? And why, why are you doing so much? So they really get someone on this. And my husband used to say, is this going to make us any money? So the answer is no and no. But the other thing, like for instance, I'm the chair and have been for years of the Courthouse Tours Committee for the Pima County Bar. And we go out and do courthouse tours for kids and all. And I do not always believe in committee meetings. I think sometimes it's very difficult to people to get out of their office and go down. So we don't have meetings, but I just get you on my committee, and all you have to do is agree to make the courthouse tour. We send out a long list and a long letter of how you do it and what you have to do and everything else, and we don't ever have any meetings. So you can have committees that don't have meetings and come up with a way to do it. If you can do too much, you can do too many committees, you can get all your time involved. And I'm not asking young lawyers to do that. I'm not asking the new lawyer to do that. But finding a committee that they might like or find fun to do is, not that hard. Some of the committees work a lot harder, like civil procedure. They have a lot of rules to go over, and they have to get them right, and then they present them to the court to enact. So it can be a lot of time-consuming work, but you don't have to start right out with something like that. You can start out with a committee that has a different focus, and that may be, like for instance, one of the committees that they're always looking for people to help on is like for the to help organize the state bar, convention. Committees that have to do with whatever section, whatever area you're going to be into, like family law. I'm on the family law section, and they need people that are involved and can do things, help plan CLE. The young lawyers have a lot of their committees that have to do with. They actually had physical athletic games, which they had a lot of the teenager, I think it's 6th and 7th grade middle schools or whatever else that went and had a big, they needed people to be referees and to be, help be starters and to do all those things. So you'll find something.
How do you find out what committee needs what?
Well, the first thing is to join the Young Warriors, and then to write to the president of the Young Warriors and say, I'm interested in being on some committees and being a part of this. And then that's all you'll have to do, and then they will get in touch with you. Say, what would you like me to do? I mean, you could be involved with the law school liaison committee, where they try to work with the law schools and try to help out. And they'll give you a list and tell you what to do, and you can go on one, and if you don't like it and want to try another one, you can do that too. As far as the state bar, you have to write to the state bar president. He usually makes those appointments in before June of the meeting, and this is the new incoming president, the president-elect. And you tell them, and there's a list of committees, and you can get that from the state bar, and they will have a list of all the committees, and then you can send your resume and say, I would like to be a member of this committee, and because I feel that I would like to really help with the rules of civil procedure. I would like to be on the committee on that has to do with minority women in the law, because I'm interested in the aspect of what we can do to help with equality in the legal profession. We're talking about trying to get a task force that will look at disabled lawyers to see whether or not we can help them find jobs and what can be done to help them in their careers. So you just have to write and ask and say to be on it. And then what you do is say, too, I may like to be on this committee, but if there's some other committee that I can be of a help on, please let me know and keep my name involved. And then you keep doing that so that and you'll get on a committee, I'm sure, because they really need people. And certainly it's good for your career.
And should you try to be involved in both the local and the state bar?
I think it's good to be involved in the Pima County Bar or the Maricopa County Bar, yes, because you have a lot better opportunity to probably move faster in those areas than you might in the state bar. And the one downside of the state bar committees is the fact that if you're in Tucson, a lot of the meetings are in Phoenix, but more and more we have them done on conference calls so that you don't have to go up there because it's just too cumbersome. My idea, and the one thing I'd love to see, is the state bar to finally get a video conferencing ability so that we could have a video conference meeting, because it would make it so much nicer. It's always better to do it that way. It's a little hard on the phone. It's better to be a one-on-one.
And what about, okay, so you write to all these people and then you get a flood of people wanting, like, how do you say no so you don't offend people?
Well, what you do is you just say, geez, how wonderful it is that everyone wants me. Oh boy, you really love me. You love me. You really love me. And just say, because I can't do everything. I'd like to start out here, but I want you to keep me in mind. And if there's any special project where it wouldn't take a lot of time, please keep me in mind, because I might want to be able to be a part of it. Like, for instance, the Pima County Bar, we did the Pima County Bar picnic. We did the past president's dinner. So there's sometimes special projects where you don't have to be there all year round, but just for that special time.
Okay, and what about, this is kind of a follow-up, what about if you just are there just a little bit? Sometimes people feel like they're not part of things because they've only shown up for a couple hours. Do you think that they should feel that way? Like if they volunteer to be a referee or something like that and they don't know anybody, just go? Or
just go. It's hard. That's hard, and that's where it's good. And don't be afraid to go to whoever when the person calls you and says, I'd like you to be a referee for 2 hours. And you say, okay, I'm going to do that, but let me tell you, I'm going to feel a little awkward because I don't know anybody, so when I get there, will you please, I'd like to, know where you are so that if I need help or I need to know that at least there's a person there that knows me in case I get conked on the head, that I'm here. But in that instance, sometimes you're going to be awkward. I mean, I've gone to parties where I haven't known a soul, and it is very awkward. And what do? You just stand there, you try to make conversation with somebody, and they make conversation with you, but their eyes are trying to go over there to somebody else that they know because they don't know you. And I don't have an answer for that. I wish I did, because it would make it a lot easier. I sometimes went to the National Conference of Bar Presidents, and the first time I was there, I didn't know anyone there. And it was very awkward. I was very uncomfortable, but what am I going to do? I just muscled through it, and now I'm on their program committee, and I'm doing a presentation in Chicago for Law School for Legislators that we've got Ron Johnson from Phoenix and Professor Miles Link and a lobbyist from Chicago, and we're doing a program actually to try to show people how to do a law school for legislators, which we did here in Arizona, to try to make the bar a resource to legislators and try to help them know the law, especially new legislators, of what the balance of power is and various other things. And so you take it from there. I'll tell you, that first meeting, and maybe even the second one, was pretty harsh, because I felt like a third wheel and didn't know a soul, and everybody knew everybody else, and I was kind of standing on the outside, which I wasn't used to, because in Arizona by this time almost 90% of the people know me, and so there's not a place that I go that I don't know anyone, especially in the legal field, and so it was hard.
So what did you do?
I did it. I sat there and I tried to make conversation with people who had absolutely no interest in someone from Arizona who they'd never seen in their lives, and made conversation with someone else, and then when they had said sign up for committees, I met so-and-so and I signed up, and
So you just stick it out.
stick it out. That's all you can do. But it is uncomfortable. You just have to look like you're having fun and that you know people. That's all. Learn how to be an actress. So, anyway, the other thing I did want to tell that I feel like students should know is.
Hey, one second, you didn't even change that tape. It's coming up. Unless you can say it in 5 seconds.
I can't say anything in 5 seconds, unfortunately.